Somebody has a good question here of, it sounds like you're doing a ton of different stuff. You're doing video views, you're doing link clicks, conversions, Advantage Plus, there's retargeting. How are you confident that any of the things you're doing are driving incremental value and lift if the conversions are happening beyond 7 days? How are you confident in that? I mean, probably obviously Northbeam helps you in that, but what's your take on it?
Yeah, no, I have incrementality set up from 1 day to 30 days across the board that I look at.
Which, by the way, is a thing that like Northbeam does. It looks at, it'll look at that for, I mean,
it does.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, the incrementality, and again, you need data obviously in the platforms or in Northbeam specifically to do this, but I know my lift. I know my lift is percentage lift on average across the board. And again, a lot of this stuff, you are taking liberties. You're basing, you have to base some stuff on assumptions no matter what, right? Because you're like, hey, I know that this is on the same trajectory. Is it in the higher end of the spectrum or the lower end of the spectrum? Even if it's the lower end, I'm not scaling it as hard as I am on the higher. And so that's how I'm looking at things. Now, if you're running like video views and, reach and frequency stuff, a lot of that stuff, you're not necessarily going to see it play out in Northbeam, or even in, a lot of these, like even on Facebook, it's going to be, but the way that you're looking at it is that's where I really love post-purchase surveys like No or Farling is what he calls it now. And, I'm always looking downstream, right? So if I'm running connected TV and I am seeing a lift in post-purchase survey and first touch is connected TV, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Let's take that same thought process and let's try that on Facebook and YouTube with video views. I'm not going to necessarily see it come back in performance. I'm just going to see it as somebody remembers me and clearly they're buying. And we definitely see that lift. And that's why focusing on more of like taking the reins off of like, an MTA multi-touch attribution and going like, all right, what's my blended? What's my MER? How am I doing with all these other nuances put in? You're just taking that liberty on that front and making some assumptions. But as long as you feel like it's moving in the right direction, I always go into it. I'm a huge fan of video views. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's a fun, a lot of these other pieces are a function of what's doing well currently, in my opinion. So like if you see, a lot of times people say, well, my middle funnel's been doing well, but I see it dying. Okay, well, number one, was last time you put creative in it? And number two, what's the fun, what's the fuel you're giving to the mid funnel? And that's where video view can play a role there.
Yeah. And I'll add a final thought onto this. And that also goes back to the question before on the 250,000. Don't gloss over whitelisting. If you have a strong whitelisting structure, we've had creators that in and of themselves we built a whole campaign and structure around just them and their audiences. And then we go back to them. We're like, hey, we want to get 4 or 5 more pieces of creative from you before Black Friday. You doing different selling points, trying different things, and we build it around their core audience. We create a custom audience off of it and lookalikes off there of those audiences. And that's another way to really get scale at this thing, and then building that and trying that across the board. So that's something I would also add in there.